Welcome everyone. First and foremost, before I get into any details of what this video is about, I want to really give a heartfelt shout out to you all that have supported the channel. We've hit the milestone of 1,000 subs, which I didn't think I'd ever get to, but we have, so thank you very much. Next, as I said, this is an update video for anyone that is new, that has come across this video and that wants to get the specific deep dive build breakdown and details. Please see the previous video. I'll add a link into the description. So, as I said, update video. This is very much hitting the top end now and probably more so directed towards the min-maxes. I have made 3 relatively significant changes, I would say, in terms of trying to push especially the movement speed. As you can see here during the gameplay that I've flashed up every now and again, I am now consistently hitting movement speed between baseline around 150% to 167%, and then conditionally, if I get a hasted mod stolen through Headhunter or even a haste shrine, I can get upwards of 250 movement speed. So I will show how I've achieved this. It does come with some risks, but I'll get into that once we get there. 2 very quick points I want to bring up, or 3 actually. There seems to be a consistent theme around the comments and a lot of people still struggling with just the core gameplay loop of the build. At least that's the impression I get. People who are dying, there seems to be a reoccurring theme as to why. The very first, if I jump back to the very beginning of this map, you'll notice that I do not just run directly into the fighting. I actually sit here for a couple of seconds, deliberately building up my regen. You can see at the very start, the regen is actually struggling to keep up with the life spend of my skills. And it's only once it starts to cap out and really max out that I actually move forward. Many people are still engaging in fights and initiating their fighting, as I would say, cold, without their regen stacked, and then are surprised that they're just dying instantly. Tech rods and even the old recoup method needs some time for the regen to layer upon itself and to build to the higher levels which sustain your survivability. So not only at the start of the map, but you'll also notice in this gameplay, I do not stop casting ever. Not when I'm looting, not when I'm transitioning between packs. I'm casting constantly, and this is why the movement speed, I keep going on about this in my videos, really emphasizing that people should go for the movement speed option because it is what synergizes so well with these regen tech, is that we don't need to spend time dodging, reapplying our regen, losing our regen, layering. We're just constantly moving and constantly casting, and it's what makes the build work so well. If you're stopping to loot, even if you notice when I loot, I am clicking like a madman while still holding down my abilities to constantly maintain that regen. If for any reason, whether it's zoning into abyssal depths or going back to town to dump off a stash full of loot, if I come back into a map, I spend that 5, 6, 7 seconds building up my regen. Use your life flask to help you out. Build up that regen, it'll help with your survivability. So that's the first thing. Secondly, ultimately, if you're having struggles, Veil of the Night, the helmet, which reduces your resistances to 0, it is always a possibility just to simply replace that with a resistance, triple resistance helmet, get some resistance onto your rings, and just go the resistance route. Especially once you're starting to push the min-max build, which I'll show you in a moment. Even myself today, running this build, I died twice on death explosions. So it does come with a few risks when you start sacrificing a bit of defense in order to really boost your movement speed to those maximum levels. So replacing Veil of the Night is always an option. It's not a mandatory helmet piece. One other thing which may help, and I haven't really highlighted this in my other videos, balance your attributes such that you have the minimum amount of intelligence and dex to meet your gear and spell requirements, and put everything else into strength. The reason we do this is because strength provides you max life, which synergizes with the Rathpith and the whole life stacking tech rods tech, and it just gives you more survivability, more energy shield for our Beta's hand conversion. So dex and intelligence at the bare minimum that you need. If you're getting your max gems, you typically will need 157 intelligence, so anything a little bit more than that. I'm now running Spirit and a Companion again, so I need 92 dex. If you're not running Spirit and you're still running Combs Chest, you'll need a lot less dex than this. Everything else should go into strength. So all your travel nodes, you'll notice the vast majority of mine are all strength, strength, strength. The bare intelligence that I need, and then all this strength, 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 etc., etc. So that's another little tip for survivability. So now into the fun stuff. 3 things that I've changed. So prior, we were running Combs Heart, Mallee Garrows. I still use Snake Pit for pinnacle content, but as I've mentioned before, I more often than not, especially in mapping, run my high rarity, more max life and cast speed ring. But first change that I've done is I've replaced Combs Heart with a Falconer's jacket. As you notice here, it has a implicit 5% movement speed, so that's a win straight away in terms of our push to maximize our movement speed. And then specifically the 3 prefixes that I'm looking for are tier 1 max life. Tier 1, I've got tier 2 here unfortunately, but a increase evasion energy shield and again max life. So remember, we're stacking life, so the 2 max life rolls on the prefixes, and Spirit. And a nice to have is then a attribute, which in effect allows us to stack more strength, as I highlighted earlier in our passive tree. So, you know, intelligence, although it's not strength, it reduces our getting our intelligence requirements set, and the more strength that we can put into our passive tree, and chaos resistance, because we still want to cap out that chaos resistance. So those are the 5 stats that I'm looking for: max life, Spirit, an attribute, and chaos resistance. These chests, at time of recording, I literally bought them for anywhere from 1 to 5 exalt each. No one wants these specific chest pieces with those stats. I'd imagine with this video coming out, potentially that may jump up, so jump on it if you want to just test it out at least. You know, for a couple of exalts, pick 1 or 2 up. I picked up about 10 or 12, slammed corruptions onto them, got a 3rd socket on a couple, and that just allowed to get more life again socketed in. So Combs running 1500 max life. We've got about, including the attribute roll, about 300, 350, then plus the sockets. Still losing a significant amount of life, but as you can see here down in the bottom left, I'm still running with an effective HP pool of over 7,500. So I still feel very tanky. And that's the whole reason why I could justify this. And so not only are we getting the 5% implicit movement speed from the Falconer's jacket, it also opens up our Spirit backup. So Combs, obviously the big downside to having the massive HP boost is it does not allow you to have Spirit. Now with the Falconers, we've got our base 100 Spirit back. We've also gone for the Spirit roll. We need a minimum of 20 to set this up. And if anyone's been following on from my previous videos, they know what I loved to run earlier was our little Frozen Mandible buddy. And specifically with the haste aura. So that gives us 20% increase cast speed and 10% movement speed. So there, our companion combined with the Falconer's implicit gives us 15% more movement speed than we had before. And then it also allows us to run the Combat Frenzy charge regulation combo. For those that aren't aware, very quick recap. Combat Frenzy gives you a frenzy charge. If you freeze an enemy, we're running cold spells. So that happens all the time. You pretty much have 100% uptime on your frenzy charges. And then charge regulation consumes those frenzy charges to give you a 15% more multiplicative boost to your skill speed, which is our cast speed in our case. So the cast speed just gets to absurd levels, combined with another change which I made, which I'll highlight next. Well, we may as well use that as a segue. So the second change I've made is, and this is really highlighting what I've tried to hint at, but really haven't emphasized in my previous videos. I know people love focusing on the demon form stacks. Ooh, look, I can get to 300, 400, 500 stacks, and that's what they really focus on. If that's your thing, you know, ultimately play the way you like. The game's all about, it is a game, have fun, strive for what you want to achieve. Ultimately, the game is tuned and balanced in such a way that everything dies so easy. Honestly, gear is so overpowered at the moment. Things like the Wrathpith, Tech Rod, Bloodletting, Atului's Bloodletting is just so overpowered at the moment that you honestly just don't need that much DPS. So to even further emphasize that, I've completely dropped my crit damage bonus from the Maligarrows and picked up a set of gloves just for a little bit of extra survivability. I crafted these for a bit of fun, enjoying crafting. And the whole point was just to get a little bit more energy shield, max life, which actually gives us a bit more damage anyway. And triple socket with increased effect, 48% cast speed. So really the DPS actually relatively balances out, and I have a bit more survivability with these gloves. Completely optional though. Maligarrows is still a very, very solid option. But for those, like I said, min-maxers that want to toy around with some new ideas, 3-socket gloves with just an abundance of cast speed, and it gives us a little bit of extra survivability. Further emphasizing the point of really diminishing the need for a silly abundance of DPS, I have completely stripped back all DPS passive nodes. So before we path down here and picked up this cluster of increased regeneration, spell damage, life cost, which boosts up the Adorned's Bloodletting damage. So this whole pathing, I think 8 or so points, dropped it. This crit cluster, dropped it. And what I've done is I've dumped all those points and just went crazy and picked up more 8% movement speed down here. There's 3% movement speed over here. And I believe there was like 1 or 2 points in these places where I could pick up some more movement speed. So ultimately ended up picking up about, I think, 12 or 13 more movement speed. So 15 from the chest, another 13 or so in this passive reshuffle. And then I said 3 things. There was actually, 4. Fourth, and this is a bit, not massive change, but picked up an Adorned. Ultimately, you only need a 50% one. The next breakpoint is 100%, which is just out of my price bracket at the moment. I've been experimenting too much and wasting my currency, but anything over 50% and then getting corrupted movement speed jewels. So if I actually get the proper mouse over, you can see that 2% goes to 3% from the Adorned. And I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 corrupted movement speed jewels. Ideally with something, a second stat, which is beneficial: projectile damage, projectile speed, elemental damage are the 3 that are helpful. So that combination with the Adorned with 5 jewels gave another 3 to 5% movement speed. So like I said, very minor, but we're really getting into the min-maxing territory. As a result, here in town, you can see my base movement speed now as a result at the very bottom end is at 122. And furthermore, then if you look at these nodes here, movement speed, if you've killed recently, you have 100% uptime on this when you're zooming through a map. So there's 4%, 3%, 3%, so that's 10%. So whenever we kill anything in a map, that bumps up to 132 as a baseline. Then if you've got, like I said, at the top end, and you've got a rite of passage with a spirit of the stag, wolf, or cat, those give movement speed when you kill a rare mob, 15%. So that 32 plus, sorry, 132 plus the 15, was that 100? I'm going to get bogged down in math. 147. So that's like 147 at a baseline. Then if you run a Fall of the Axe, which I haven't really touched upon previously, but it's nice to run Chilled and Grasping Vine maps because that then counts as a slow, and then you almost get 100% uptime on this Onslaught, which is another 10%. And you can just start to see where all this movement speed is coming from and why I can hit over 200%, even 250% with a haste shrine. So these two combined with the other effects that I've said already bumps that up to, I think, most of the time I'm running around in the map at about 160% movement speed. Then Headhunter, if you steal a hasted mod from a rare pack, which you almost get I dare say there would be a 90% chance that you'll get this in every single map. Hasted, I believe, gives you 30% more movement speed, or 40%, maybe actually be 40%, a ridiculous amount. And then on top, if you get a haste shrine or whatever it's called, that's when I think the maximum that I've seen it at is about 240 something %, and I'll show that in a moment. I think I caught it at about one map at about 230. So that's the changes: the chest piece, the gloves, reshuffling the passives away from the damage to damage clusters here and putting them into movement speed around this area, and then finally the Adorned with the corrupted jewels. So the last thing I'll just very quickly show is, this video is a little bit just chopped together, I apologize, but it's just a quick update for people that have been following on to see what I've been doing. But this video here that I'll show you serves two purposes. First, again, showing how I ramp up, but I've actually deliberately run this map in human form to again further emphasize how little importance the demon's form stacks really ultimately have. Obviously, it's not quite as efficient. It takes sometimes a half a second more to kill packs, or it struggles a little bit more in the high densities, but ultimately I can run around a full map in human form and just be just as effective. So really, this whole setup could almost be run on any ascendancy with no ascendancy points. The one thing that Infernalist benefit it gets is the demon form, and due to the fact that we can still stack our demon form to 200-300 stacks, allows us to one-shot pinnacle content while not needing to focus on any DPS in our passives and our gear too much. And also Baitit's Hand, the conversion of life to energy shield, allows us to get more defensive layer through an energy shield. So that's the real two big benefits of the Infernalist with this setup. But as you can see here, I don't want to leave this playing for too long, but human form, trust me, you know, demon form stacks aren't the be all and end all. I think I did actually, there we go, we got a haste shrine. And let's see if I brought up the character sheet at any point during this. But I'll let this play through. You can get an idea of how crazy it gets with this haste shrine. There you go, 222. I believe that even popped up a little bit higher once I managed to kill a rare mob. Did I actually capture it? There's no rare mobs around. Typical. I won't take my word on it. It got up to about 230. The max I've seen it at is about 250. Anyway, that's all. They're the changes that I've done. So very quick update. A few tips at the beginning as well for those that have been struggling. And again, thank you very much for the support, for the subs. It is much appreciated. And the next videos that this will probably be the last video in terms of min-maxing and pushing the movement speed setup, because it's pretty much almost hit a critical point at the moment. The only benefits or upgrades that I could really do is getting another 5% on the boots and getting 100% Adorned, and both of those we're looking at mirror level costs, so I probably won't be bothering with that. The next videos that I'll be releasing will be probably a Black Flame variant, because that seems to be quite a popular request. I will warn, Fireball is not the most efficient spell as an Infernalist because of its low base crit, but I'll try and set something up since it seems to be a popular request, and may do some other similar sort of variant type videos on alternate ways you can run this setup. Again, all the best. Thank you everyone, and yep, see you next time.